Most owners know their dog needs exercise. What most owners do not know is what happens, specifically and progressively, when the exercise is consistently insufficient. Not the dramatic, visible suffering that would be impossible to miss, but the specific behavioral and physiological cascade that begins quietly, builds gradually, and produces a dog whose problems look like personality rather than what they actually are. The predictable output of a body and a nervous system that is not getting what it was built to require. The dog who is under exercise does not look like a dog who is suffering. She looks like a dog who is difficult, who is reactive or destructive or anxious or unable to settle or hard to train or demanding in ways that exhaust the household. She looks like a dog who needs more discipline, more training, more management. She needs more movement, and the difference between those two diagnoses determines everything that follows. The first thing that happens when exercise is consistently insufficient is the most invisible and the most consequential. Her stress hormone baseline rises. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone in dogs as in humans, is metabolized through physical activity. The body that moves regularly has a mechanism for processing the cortisol that ordinary daily life generates. The body that does not move regularly accumulates it, not in dramatic spikes, but in the slow elevation of a baseline that has no outlet and therefore no relief. A dog whose cortisol baseline is chronically elevated is not a dog who is occasionally stressed. She is a dog whose nervous system is operating from a state of low-level activation that has become her new normal. She is not overreacting to things. She is reacting from a starting point that is already closer to the threshold than it should be, which means that the stimulus required to produce a reactive response is smaller. The reactive response itself is larger, and the recovery from it takes longer. The barking that seems disproportionate. The reactivity on the leash that appears from nowhere. The inability to settle in the evening that looks like stubbornness. These are not character flaws. They are the behavioral output of a cortisol baseline that physical activity would have kept in range, and that the absence of physical activity has allowed to accumulate past the point where ordinary life is navigable without cost. The second thing that happens is the redirection of energy into the available environment. She has a daily energy budget. It was calibrated by her biology, by her breed, her age, her individual metabolism, for a life that includes a specific quantity of physical output. When that output does not happen through exercise, it does not disappear. It looks for another channel. The destructive behavior that appears at predictable times is this redirection in its most visible form. The chewing, the digging, the countersurfing, the systematic investigation, and sometimes dismantling of available objects. These are not misbehavior in the moral sense. They are energy expenditure in the only form the environment currently offers. This is the piece most owners miss entirely. The dog who destroyed the couch cushion is not a bad dog. She is a dog with a daily energy budget that was not spent on anything it was designed to be spent on, and that was spent on the couch cushion instead because the couch cushion was there. The solution is not a sturdier couch, it is a different distribution of the same daily budget. The third thing that happens is the deterioration of the dog's capacity to learn. Physical exercise does not only affect the body, it affects the brain. Specifically, it affects the neurological conditions that make learning possible. Activity increases blood flow to the brain, promotes the production of neurotransmitters associated with positive affect and cognitive engagement, and reduces the cortisol that actively interferes with memory formation and behavioral flexibility. A dog who is under-exercised is not only a dog with excess physical energy. She is a dog whose brain is operating in conditions that make training significantly harder: higher baseline arousal, lower capacity for the focused attention that learning requires, reduced access to the positive emotional states that make reinforcement work effectively. The training that is not working is not failing because the dog is stubborn or because the technique is wrong. It is failing because the nervous system it is trying to teach is not in a state where teaching lands cleanly. The walk before the training session is not a warm-up. It is the prerequisite that changes what the training session is capable of producing. The fourth thing is the impact on the relationship, and it is the most personal of all the consequences. A dog whose needs are chronically unmet, whose energy has nowhere appropriate to go, whose stress baseline is elevated, whose body is telling her something is missing and she cannot name what it is a dog who is harder to live with than the dog she would be with the deficit addressed. She is more demanding, more reactive, more unsettled, more in need of management at exactly the times when management is most exhausting. And the relationship that forms around a dog who is hard to live with is not the relationship either party deserves. The owner becomes the manager of a problem rather than the companion of a dog. The dog becomes the source of a friction that was generated by a simple, unmet need rather than by anything inherent to who she is. The dog that lives with enough exercise is a different dog. Not because exercise transforms personality, but because personality in dogs, as in most animals, expresses itself differently depending on whether the basic biological requirements for functioning are being met. The settled, trainable, companionable dog that most owners are hoping for is very often already there, inside the reactive, difficult, hard to manage dog they currently have, waiting for the one change that changes everything else. Most owners respond to the behavioral outputs of underexercise with behavioral solutions. More training for the reactivity, more management for the destruction, more patience for the inability to settle. These are not wrong responses, they are insufficient ones, because they address the behavioral expressions of the underlying deficit while the deficit itself continues to generate new expressions. Flip the approach entirely, address the deficit, not as a supplement to the training and management, as the foundation that determines what the training and management are capable of producing. A dog who is getting enough physical exercise is a dog whose cortisol baseline is regulated, whose daily energy budget is appropriately spent, whose brain is in the neurological conditions that make learning possible, and whose relationship with her owner is not structured around the management of a problem. She is not difficult. She is under-resourced, and under-resourced is a solvable problem with a solution that does not require her to be different. It requires her day to be. Think about the dog she would be with the deficit addressed. The evening that does not require management, because the activation that was driving the unsettled behavior was spent on the walk. It was built for. The training session where the attention is available because the cortisol that was blocking it was metabolized before the session began. The relationship that is not organized around a problem because the problem was never the dog. She has been telling you she needed more. In the destruction and the reactivity and the inability to settle and the demands that felt disproportionate to what was being asked of her. She was not being difficult. She was giving you the only behavioral signal available for an unmet need that her body could not stop generating. She needs to move. Not because you failed her, because she was built to. Give her what she was built for. Watch what happens to everything else. Has increasing your dog's exercise ever changed her behavior in a way that surprised you? And what was the behavior that improved most? Tell me in the comments. If this is the kind of watching you want to keep doing, subscribing means the next one finds you.